Welcome to the No Stages podcast, episode 5. And Rick, you're kind of scraping for guests this week.
I know. It's tough, but sometimes we got to do charity work.
Yeah, guest is
you. But you're so often on the other side of the microphone, if you will, that it's only fair that you get to talk a little bit about yourself, which I know you love doing.
Oh, yeah, it's my favorite thing to do, Rick.
But you got a really cool story for this year's RAAM, and we're going to dive into that a little bit. So, first of all, for people who don't know you, which is probably not that many, you're kind of our Mike Riley. You're our voice of RAAM. You've announced for 10 years for us, maybe longer, 12 years?
Since 2009.
Yeah, so 14 years for us, I guess. So you kind of are the voice that people hear when they're crossing the finish line in both Durango and Annapolis. And you've been around RAAM for a long time. So why don't you just touch base a little bit on how you got started in RAAM, and then we'll talk a little bit about what you're doing this year.
I got started in RAAM. I actually was sitting at school in college, and there was a bicycling magazine out in this area in the office, and I picked it up, and Great American Bike Race was the featured story. And I was like, wow, that looks kind of cool. And I had just started doing some citizens class racing and was enjoying it, but that really grabbed my attention. And just as I worked my way up the USCF ladder, that was always in the back of my mind as something that I really wanted to do. What really grabbed me was riding at night.
Which is interesting because a lot of people don't like that.
I hate the heat of the day and love being out in the dark.
I'm right there with you, but it is kind of especially for people who are racing more traditional races, crits, stage races, they're not riding at night. And so it's kind of an unusual thing to attract you to the sport.
I think it was it's almost like I just got the image of a rolling party with the support vehicle and the lights and music playing, and it really grabbed my imagination.
Yeah, and that's kind of cool. And your story is one that we'd like to see more of, more conventional bike racers that are racing USA cycling events or whatever whatever international bodies there are, progressing through, trying some of these longer distance races. And you dove in not as a solo racer, you dove in kind of as a team racer.
Yeah, to me, it was like, oh, I've got to do solo RAAM because that's the real RAAM. But the opportunity came up. I had started this race team in San Antonio, Texas, and it was crazy. My dad had a photo. I was on the front page of the Fort Worth Telegraph Star or something like that. And it was just a random photo that had been taken at the Spinco 500 in 1985. And this is 1993. Wow. And my dad had this thing framed on his office desk, and the president of Pacific Care of Texas came into his office, and he said, I want to start a bike team. And I happened to be there that day. I was like, really?
Sponsorship comes in its strangest forms, right?
It was that easy.
Yeah. You were lucky because that's not normally how sponsorship works. And so anyway, you met the guy from Pacific Care, and
yeah, so we started Team Pacific Care, which was a San Antonio Masters bicycle racing club and team. And one of the guys on the team, I really wanted to do RAAM. He was like, hey, how about relay RAAM? And I was like, RAAM has relays? And we just threw together a 4-person team and got sponsored by Trek Bicycles, and went out there. And I was just kind of the mindset I would love to go out and finish this thing, and we ended up winning.
Which is always a good feeling. But how often do you hear at the finish line, well, we just came out to finish, but about when we hit Kansas, we realized we were actually racing with other teams.
Yeah, well, I think the other 3 guys on the team were all wanting to win from the gun, and I was just like, wow, okay. And then once it really became a race, immediately, It was like, oh yeah, I definitely want to go. There's a shot of me coming in at the finish. We finished in Savannah that year, but the 4 of us are pace lining in just, with the last few miles. and the three of them are really into the pace line. I'm off the back looking over my shoulder to make sure we're not being caught, because we had changed clothes and done all this stuff. And it was like, come on,
We got to keep
I don't want to
moving.
blow it here at the end.
Yeah, and that's always a terrible feeling, of course, right? You see it so many, well, not a lot, but the times you do see it, even with the pros crossing the finish line and then getting nipped at the line, that's painful, painful.
It was funny though, every time we would pass a solo rider, I felt guilty, because it was just like, oh man, this is just, how does that feel to be a solo and be passed? And we ended up doing relay again the next year, and got a lot of sponsorship money that year. And I don't know, the money just didn't make us faster. We got blown off the road because tactics really changed.
Yeah.
We had done hour on, hour off, hour on, hour off, and then then 4 hours off, and then hour and a half on, hour and a half off, hour and a half on, hour and a half off.
Which now we know, really long poles.
Oh yeah,
really long.
So yeah, and we'd broken into A, B, C, D, and A and B paired up, but way long. And then the next year, the Kern Wheelmen were out there and some other really strong teams, and they were doing 15-minute poles, and it was just like, whoa.
Which is now the norm.
Yep.
You know, for certainly for 4s and 8-person teams. And so after you kind of went through that evolution and you got to see the change of team relays, you decided, well, why am I doing this as a 4-person team? And
well, then I went solo.
Oh, you went solo first.
So I was 93, then 94. We were quite a bit faster. I think we won in 6 days, 5 hours. And on the same course, we got 5th in 5 days, 20 hours, I think it was.
Tactics matter.
And I remember we had this just arrogant shirt. I would not wear it, but it was, losing is not an option. And then one of our crew, I loved it, crossed out losing and put 3rd is not an option. And then he crossed that out and had 4th is not an option.
Well, so 2 very good lessons to learn from that, and the whole race itself. Being able to poke fun at yourself is a good thing.
Oh yeah.
And never underestimate your competition, because a lot of the teams or solo racers don't know the other teams are solo racers. And we've had some shocking results pop up because of that. And you got to experience that firsthand.
I wish I still had that shirt, because I'd love to hold it up right now.
That would be great. But
so in 95, I went solo. I got sponsored by Serrata Bicycles and Burroughs Wellcome Pharmaceuticals. And that was just completely out of the blue. I'd been on a clinical trial medication, and they made me their poster boy. And I gave a speech at the product launch to their sales force. And one of their marketing people came up and he goes, "I'm going to make you a star." And that didn't happen, but he did sponsor.
But he did sponsor, yeah. And it's so one of the interesting things, and we'll get back to your 2-person teams and tandems, because you're one of the very few people who have raced solo, tandem, 2 and 4. The only thing you haven't done is race 8. So you've kind of covered the suite of races almost. But it is kind of interesting, like how things like sponsorship pop up and your experience with racing. I think it's what makes you a great announcer, because you get to see these racers come in, their race, good, bad, ugly, successful, DNF. You can relate to them, and on a real, true competitor and personal level. And so that's really cool to see on stage.
Thank you, Rick. I honestly appreciate that. And I feel like I do have a really well-rounded background in relay, because I mean, there have been years when I actually was pretty strong and one of the stronger riders on the team. And there were a couple of years where I was really the anchor and just had some really tough times. And I know what it's like to be out there just feeling like you're weighting the team down, and that's really tough to deal with. And then if your teammates start piling on, so I think it's made me a good team racer, because I'm really aware of the dynamics that are going on throughout.
Yeah, and I think RAAM brings out all of that in people. It brings out your best and worst qualities because of the dynamics you go through on the road. You have good days, bad days. Heck, you have good minutes and bad minutes
Absolutely.
out there. And especially as a relay team, you count on your teammates to prop you up and keep you moving, and your crew. And even a solo racer, you're counting on your crew when you're having bad days. You're counting on that crew to lift you up. And so when you did solo, it's obviously you on the bike, but you also did solo tandem, which is a whole different level of, just commitment. And,
It's the hardest thing I've ever done.
People call it crazy and insane, but it's not. I mean, I know you and I know both your tandem partners. None of you are crazy nor insane, but it is a whole different level of focus and commitment to riding solo.
You have two solos on one bike, and the interpersonal dynamic. I mean, anybody that says, "Oh, that other person on there," no, they're not lifting you up. And it takes a lot of energy when one of you is down to try to lift the other person up. And when you've got wind and you can't communicate with one another, if you're stoking and you're just staring at the back, in between somebody's shoulder blades for hour after hour after hour, it's brutal. Or you feel amazing and your partner is dying.
So I assume sleep is tricky if you're not both on the same page there.
Terry and I in 02 that was as fit as I've ever been. We were having a great race. We were actually climbing with the solos, and I mean, we were strong. What killed us was crosswinds, really strong crosswinds from Trinidad, Colorado, all the way to Stillwater, Oklahoma. And on a tandem, that was
brutal.
It was so hard to captain because you're just fighting the wind. But yeah, I mean, no excuses. If we hadn't been in that kind of shape, we wouldn't have finished.
Yeah. And then
and we got way off on sleep.
Yeah.
Because I would go to sleep. Terry couldn't sleep. We'd get back on the bike and then she would just start nodding off right away, but she could not sleep.
That's tough. Like if it's just you as a solo racer, it's just you. So you can sleep or not sleep whenever you want to. Or as a team racer, you have other people to kind of lift that load for you. But when you're sharing a bike,
well, and she would come on really strong in the heat of the day when I'm fading.
Yep.
And she would just be like, come on, we've got to take advantage of me right now because I can ride. And you really are not doing well right now, George.
Yeah. So challenging, but you've successfully overcome all those. You raced 2-person with Terry as well. Successful in that race.
So that when I went solo, the t-shirt that year was the toughest race in the universe. And it was funny because as we were rolling out, I looked over and there's a tandem and I was like, that looks way harder than what I'm doing right now. And as soon as I finished, I was like, I want to try this on a tandem because that looks so crazy hard.
And I think if I'm not incorrect, you and Terry were the last solo tandem riders to finish. Yeah, not after you guys, and that was 02.
So I did it in 2000 with Katie Lindquist, and
2002.
And no tandems have finished.
Yeah, not
on solo.
Yeah, that's that should give you a testament to how hard that actually is. And then you took a few years and raced.
Well, in 02, we immediately got offered a full ride for the next year.
To
do RAAM.
Yeah,
on the tandem, and I was out I was like, wow, how do you turn that down?
Right.
And I mean, it was a substantial offer. And it was cold rain. We're in Oregon, and my neck was still sore from racing RAAM. And I was like, I don't have it in me right now. And that's why I've always said, you can't pay me to do this race. It's got to be such an internal just fire that there is nothing more important than getting to the finish line. And I didn't have that.
So that's actually 2 really good points that were kind of made separately. One, RAAM is something certainly for solo racers, but even for teams, like you really got to want to be there. It's not something you just want to, it's not a passing fancy. You have to want to do it for whatever reason. right? Whether it's for your nonprofit awareness, whether it's for personal goals, you name it. But the other interesting thing that you said was, the money doesn't make you faster. So many people think they need to have all the things to race, and you really don't.
Nope.
You just need to have what you need and be prepared. You don't need all the extra tour buses and all these grandiose things. It's not going to make you better or faster. What makes you better or faster is a great crew and some really efficient, great cyclists.
Yep.
And that's it.
You nailed it. I mean, that's so, and I always took pride in kind of having grungy Rams.
Jerry Tatry, Jason Lane, like
right.
Seriously, like some of these people, like bare bones, and they've been exceptionally successful.
So when we were putting on Race Across Oregon in 2003 and 2002 and 2003, we really were noticing that the two-person teams looked like they were having fun.
Yeah.
And you can't say two-person is not ultra.
That's no, it's way. Hard.
And I was like, let's do RAAM one more time as a two-person team. And no mixed team had finished. And so we thought, we can be the first mixed team to finish. That's a record nobody can ever take away from you.
And a cool one. And you're right. I think most people, like, moving from 8 to 4, I won't say it's easy, but it's a relatively easy jump. It's a very palatable jump. I don't think people necessarily realize like how difficult the jump from a 4-person to a 2-person and 2-person to solo. They are big jumps. You're big commitment level and just difficult.
Yeah. And I mean, as a 2-person, if one of you goes down or gets sick, I mean, the other one's got to really carry quite of a load
and not burn themselves out in the process, because you're the only other option.
And you can never take for granted that, I'm the strong one on the team. Well, you might be for a day, and the next day, whatever might happen, and all of a sudden you're really relying on that teammate who you were belittling or complaining about. I mean, you've got to stay a team, which is one of the things I love about it.
Yeah, and we see it more often than not. I saw it with my dad and his partner on their 60+ 2-person team. My dad was having a really bad day, sick on the bike. So Dan, his teammate, took off, said, "No problem, I got this." And a few hours later, Dan was on the side of the road throwing up, and my dad had to get back up. So that's not an uncommon story. You can't, your regulating of your speed and outputs has to be more cautious.
Yep, very much so.
But over that time, you decided that was your favorite style of racing. So you did.
In 04, I'm always looking for the perfect ride or the perfect race, which is what I love about these events, RAW and RAAM, because you have so many different pulls that one of those, you're going to find that magic.
Yeah.
But 04, it was a RAAM where when we finished, I was actually happy.
That's good.
And I came in and was just like, this is the way I want to finish.
Yep. And that's a good way to kind of bow out, if you will. I mean, there's a reason why the John Elways of the world win a Super Bowl and walk away. It's a cool way to leave, even if you got a little left in the tank. You did, because you stepped away from RAAM, but stepped into RAW and had done several years of Race Across the West.
It was like I'd done it 6 times and had done all the different divisions. I'd really lost the desire to do tandem again. It just took so much out of me. But 2-person was fun. And it was like, we won. We were the first mixed team to finish. And again, nobody can take that away.
Yeah.
And the time out there, sure, there's better racers that are going to come along and beat it, and they have. But I think that record held for like 7 years.
Hey, all the records are out there to be broken, every single one of them. It's cool to even say you've had it for 5 minutes, and that 7 years is legit. And you've since then done what, 7 RAWs, Race Across the West.
Well,
all 2-person.
That was funny, because I had the Texas event.
Yep.
You all came out in 2009, and I was really overweight. I was feeling weak. I didn't know what was wrong with me, and ended up being diagnosed with Hashimoto's, which is a thyroid issue where it runs really high and then gets really low. And when we figured that out, and I got on thyroid meds, all of a sudden my heaviness just melted away. I mean, literally. And my speed came back, and I was like, wow,
I can do this.
I can ride again. And Fred came up to me and he said, hey, George, do you want to announce? And just the way he said that, I was like, and what else? And I said, I would love to. And he said, and how would you feel about officiating in between? And I said, well, I would do that if you would let me ride the first 1,000 miles, because Race Across the West went from Oceanside to Taos,
Yep.
which was an amazing course. And he said yes.
Yep.
And so that was the start of racing RAAM and then announcing.
So that opened a whole new can of worms for everybody. So for those of you who don't know, again, you have for many years raced RAAM, announced in Durango till the finish and everything was done there, fly to Annapolis and announce all the finishing in Annapolis. So pretty awesome, pretty challenging alone just to race. It's believe it or not, it is quite a bit of work to announce as well. And 2009, like you said, was kind of your birth into RAAM announcing, which has been awesome and so fun to work with you on. And it brings us to current day. So you are about 30 years past that first RAAM. So what are you doing this year? So what are you doing this year to celebrate?
Well, I wanted to race RAAM, and then I thought, how cool would it be, instead of flying to Annapolis, if we just kept going and, maybe did like ride and tie.
Yeah.
We race RAAM, finish, loop right back out, get on course, and then the relay, the teammate goes up ahead, your support van stops, and then they start riding, which is how I do a fun Halloween ride.
Sure.
And then you ride up to the car, you get in, and yeah, you're riding every mile, but it's insanely cheating. So it wouldn't have been an official RAAM. But it was like, I want to ride the course one more time to celebrate 30 years of doing this, because I love the event.
And so we came up with a cool compromise that allowed you to race
and not cheat.
and have a legitimate 9-day cutoff, just like everyone else. So you don't get any leeway on that, and still be in Annapolis for all the RAAM finishers. And that is an exceptionally awesome commitment. And I'm sure once some of the RAAM racers learn about that, they will be jaw dropped. But it's kind of cool. So you're starting on Tuesday with the RAAM solo racers, so that you have you're not getting extra time to race, but you'll have extra time to get there in front of the other teams so that you can announce.
Right. You're giving me a head start over the other teams. There are no other, and a lot of thought went into this, because we were talking about, if we go early, if there's another team in our division, that could be really unfair, because what if we have tailwinds? I mean, the weather out there plays such a big factor. Temperatures can change. And but I think you came up with something that works.
Yeah, we discussed it quite a bit. I'm actually super excited for you. I hope it goes amazingly well, because I think it's a really great way to round out your history of RAAM and RAAM. You get to race it, 30 years after your first race, which is hard to believe since you're only 35 years old.
I know. I was really young.
I know. Well, the references to newspapers and reading magazines, we knew it wasn't yesterday, because otherwise you'd be sitting on Facebook, right? But finishing that, wrapping out that 30-year celebration's pretty cool, that you get to race with a teammate who's exceptionally talented as well, Sylvia Moss, and you still get to do something that we are super appreciative of, and I hope you love, announcing the RAAM finish and making all those people hopefully start their 30-year journey.
I've never wanted to race RAAM again, because I love being at the finish and announcing. And the things I'm told by riders when they come in 2013 was kind of up in the air, because I'd been hit by a Suburban.
Yeah.
Had a shoulder surgery, was in my last day of PT, and the surgery failed. The physical therapist just watched as my arm fell out of socket. And I was like, can you at least give me a smile. She's like, no, that's not supposed to happen. So I had a shoulder surgery, I think, gosh, it wasn't even a full week before RAAM.
Yeah.
I was out in my gunslinger and yeah.
Yep.
But I had been told that year, because I knew that surgery was coming up, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And someone who was racing solo said, you have to be there. I've been looking forward to talking with you on the stage. And I was like, that's the coolest compliment I've ever received.
Well, I mean, I referred to you as our Mike Riley. So for those of you who don't know who Mike Riley is, the voice of Iron Man, what a champion. I mean, that guy is the legend of legends for Iron Man races. Everybody wants to hear you are an Iron Man. And that's cool as hell. And Mike just retired. And I've had a chance to meet him. He's a great, great guy. And you are that for us. I mean, you are that voice that racers now, when they cross that finish line, they can't wait to stand on stage with you and chat. And some of them maybe a little more lighthearted than others, depending on their state of being, but everybody wants to be there. And oftentimes they even come back and do other interviews with us at the finish line. And I think that's a huge comment about, like I said, you being able to actually tap into what they're feeling on that stage.
Well, thank you again. I absolutely love it. It's my favorite time of year. I just love seeing people come in at the finish of that event, because it means so much to me, and it's overwhelming to be there and share that with so many people every year.
Yeah, and it's super cool. We appreciate it. I think the racers really appreciate it, and it is such a cool experience. I look forward to it every year. It's so fun being out there, 5 days straight, 24 hours a day, with you hanging out, doing all sorts of craziness at 2 a.m., right? Look forward to doing it again this year. Thank you for being my guest. And we'll go back to bringing other guests on, but your story was so great. Thought it should be told to people, and look forward to many more of these, but we'll also catch up probably in Oceanside and again in Annapolis this year.
Yeah, I look forward to doing some shows in Annapolis or in Oceanside before the start for sure. And definitely the finish.
Cool. Well, thanks again, George, and I look forward to our next episode, which will be coming up soon. And appreciate you sitting here, and we'll do it again sometime.
I got to go train.
That's a good thing to do. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you again soon.